Hello, welcome to something of a Blue Room special. I'm Roger Armstrong, and I thought that actually at this point in Everton's history, it might be a bit of fun, quite interesting to have a chat about something called culture. There can be little doubt that Everton's at a very significant moment in our history, a time of great change, some change of ownership, and a move to a place on the banks of the Royal Blue Mersey in a brand new, shiny stadium. We've got a new executive team. We've got a relatively new but a very familiar manager, and we're undertaking a massive, albeit rather slow, overhaul of playing personnel. As well, the game is constantly evolving, the game is changing, transfer prices are ever increasing, ticket prices are going up, there are more games on the telly, everyone's an expert in profit and sustainability. You wouldn't recognise the old game. As someone in his 60s, in my lifetime, I've seen Everton be the Mersey millionaires, Kendall's champions. Then we've had the People's Club. We've taken a knife to a gunfight. We've had the Magnificent Seventh. We've had a DVD of victories over Liverpool, which sadly I did buy. We've had expected losses, and we don't want to be a museum. The list goes on and on. We've gone from the ownership of the Moores family to Peter Johnson. Remember him? Bill Kenwright. We can't forget him. Farhad Moshiri, and now we've got the Friedkin Group. But the one constant has been the fans, and that fan base has changed too. Not just because of the socio-economic environment, but it's changed locally, nationally, and as football and the Premier League has become global, we have attracted a global fan base. With me, enough of my ramblings, I've got my old chum, Les Roberts from Blue Monday in the Blue Room. You all right, Les?
All good. Yeah, still on a high from recording with you this morning, Rog.
Marvellous, wasn't it? Yes. And also I've got Sarah DeBow, who you might know from Mint, and also who's a very active member of the Everton Heritage Society. Sarah, how are you?
Hi guys, yeah, I'm really good. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. Now, I think this might be more than one podcast, and we might try and limit this to half an hour because it's not a really small topic, Everton and Everton's culture, dating back to 1878 and where we are today. So we'd very much encourage you to send us your comments and indeed your questions, and the email address, I don't know off the top of my head, but Les is going to tell us what it is.
Yeah, it is the Blue Room at theblueroom.com. I might be wrong. One sec. It might be the Blue Room EFC. Off to a good start. It's at right. So I was half right. It's the Blue Room at theblueroomefc.co.uk.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. And you can obviously reach out to us on our various socials, be that Twitter or Blue Sky in the case of my good self. Let us start off with a very straightforward question. I wonder if, coming to you first, Sarah, you could try and sum up what on earth Everton Football Club means to you.
I think it's history, it's family. I think it's memories built in that from being passed down from my dad. It's place. It's built in all of those social elements of my sort of childhood, and then experiencing Everton as an adult as well in a different form, sort of without my dad there. So for me, it's in a sense of community as well, seeing that as a child and then as an adult. And yeah, the change of the club as well. I think the change of the fan base, it's all of those things. It feels like it's ever changing. And it's changed so much since the 80s as well for me. So like you said, you remember the Mersey Millionaires. For me, it was sort of probably 20 years later. So yeah, a lot of history. I think mostly I would describe as family.
Okay, that's a great starting point. I think I was reflecting on this earlier today, and I've got kids of my own now, and it seems to me that the first version of Everton you encounter is the one you remember the most. And for me, that I remember driving past a bus stop in mid 1970s and seeing on a graffiti on the bus stop EFC champs when we go on the title 69-70. And so I remember us as league champions, and I don't really understand why we can't be competitive at that level anymore. Well, of course, I've witnessed all of those changes. Les, where does your version of Everton start from?
I've got two, really, because I started going when I was 8. My dad took me. First game was 84, and we got beat 4-1 by Tottenham. Then the next game I went to, we beat Man United 5-0. So that was a roller coaster. Then we won the league, obviously, and the Cup Winners' Cup at the end of that season. So I went between, I think, 88 and 87 with my dad. Then we stopped going, and I started going again in 92 with my mates when I was like 16. 15, 16. So there's two versions for me. That sort of first iteration under Howard Kendall, I've
Yeah,
got some sketchy memories of that because I was so young.
yeah,
But that was when I really got into it. I'd get the kits, I loved the players, I knew the team off by heart. That was when I really got into it. So there's that version, but then I think the one that stuck with me more, probably because of the dearth of success we've had since, is the 92, the 90s version, basically. So when I was going the match between, so I went like constantly between about 92 and 95 until I got a Saturday job and I couldn't go anymore. So I think that little sort of tranche of 90s football, that's probably my most formative Everton years, I think, really. So while I can see that what you're saying, Roger, about like, well, why can't we just be successful again? I also see the alarming like slide that we took, and it's like, well, actually, yeah, we're probably that's probably more Everton than anything, really, isn't it? Sort of
yeah,
not doing
yeah.
much, throw a trophy in occasionally. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, I remember that 69-70, and we'd won the league championship. I was 6 years old, but I was just aware of it happening. And then in the 70s, if I think about it, going through into secondary school, Everton was all about seemingly getting to League Cup semi-finals and getting knocked out randomly at the 7-3 play, and people dancing around corner flags, and Gordon Lee being quite miserable, but. That we were still Everton, and we were still like one of the top 3 or 4 teams. In my sort of childish mind, the 80s was this boost that you couldn't possibly have conceived of from, you know, 84 Cup final against Watford, winning a trophy, and then sort of Wembley becoming our second home. And of course, I'm with you. I was there in those early 90s and there for that Wimbledon game. And then, of course, we won the Cup in 95, so everything was back to normal. And then there's just this 30 years of just nonsense ever since. And I wonder, you know, what part of your experiences of Everton, Sarah, coming to you is actually about the football that we play? And is there a style of football? Can Everton be defined the great Leeds team, great in inverted commas, they're a bunch of dirty bastards kicking you around. And Kendall's team play beautiful football. And our song says Everton's the team that plays beautiful football. How important is the way we play the game to you?
Really important. I'll come back to what Les said about his thoughts of and that integral part of Everton. What his psyche is sort of the 90s for me. I would probably say it's reminiscent of that for me too. That I fell in love with those teams that came up sort of from the early 90s into sort of the FA Cup era, the Limpars. All of those players, they sort of absolutely adored them. So when I think of Everton, I think of those black and white navy blue and black hoop socks and the danker, and that for me sticks in my head. It's weird. I was speaking to a friend about that this morning about the culture of the football, and I think probably to me the culture stems from the style of football that you play, and then falls onto the terraces, falls into the fan base, falls into what the club represents. And no, I don't think we've had that for a long time. And it's just been sort of how can we survive this season, get into the next season. But I do think there were maybe elements of that during the Joe Royle era, maybe not to stress it so much as a sort of dogs of war thing, which it obviously became, but there was a style, and it did feel like it could be something that could have been built upon. He obviously didn't have the chance or the opportunity. I'd love to have seen what he could have developed. To me, that would have been the only maybe time I saw a style. We've just had so many managers that it's just been one in, one out, that we've never had that even leadership at the top either to say, this is the style of Everton Football Club. Like, certain people across the park, there is it's a style and there's expectation, and there is a demand for a style of football, and I think we're screaming out for it.
Les, can I challenge you on that
Yeah.
front? This balance between sweat on the shirt, which seems to have been the phrase of the last 10 years, and the idea of playing beautiful football. Where do you sit between those two extremes?
I think it falls somewhere in the middle. So I've never been one for sort of thinking, well, Everton need to play in a certain way, because I just kind of want to see us win. So we've had times where we've had like real backs to the wall. I think Chelsea a few years ago we beat them 1-0 and we got battered, but we came out of it 1-0. It was a vital result. Maybe in the game when Pickford made that double save,
Mm-hmm.
and you still come out on the same high, having won, having been battered for 90 minutes. You still come out on the same high. So I always thought that, but like just listening to Sarah, then I think there definitely is something, and I think we saw what's not an Everton style of football was Roberto Martinez's slow build up. The crowd don't respond to that. I think Everton probably need to play fast attacking, like probably counter-attacking football. I think Joe Raw's team was very good at that because, like, we had that season, we had Kanchelskis, we had Limpar on the other wing. We did have that pace. So I think for me, that's the style. It's sort of quick attack, get people off the feet. And, as you said, we've had, one in, one out managers for like, it just seems decades now. So there's never been that sort of transition. It's kind of been firefighting with each manager, hasn't it? So when Walter Smith came in and played some really, really dour football that sort of ground out results, that was quite a tough watch. And then David Moyes came in, and eventually he did create a really good way of playing. He created a few good teams in the 10 years he was there who did sort of play that fast counter-attacking football. I'm thinking Pienaar, Morales on the wings. So I think that's what it is for me. But I'd just like to see us win, really.
Winning's important and pride's important, isn't it, though? Pride in the performance, going away, moving down south, I've seen us get battered a lot of times in London, but coming out of whether it was White Hart Lane or Stamford Bridge, but very rarely with a positive result. There's not, including a draw, because a draw away at these bigger teams than us as they became. It's a sense of pride in your team because it's part of your identity. If I meet people, strangers for the first time, probably within 5 minutes they'll know I'm an Evertonian because I'm a bit, obsessive about it. Do you do the same, Sarah, in your line of work when you're meeting people for the first time? How quickly do you tell them you're an Everton fan?
Yeah, and I do. It's a good. I think football is that. It's like music. They tend to sort of you find people that want to talk about those things very personal, isn't it? And it brings a lot of memories to to people. So it is a form of communication, and you can connect to people. And yeah, absolutely, I do that. I think the club's definitely, like you said, that you feel that because you're quite far away. The club, I feel like the last few months, I definitely noticed a lot more people around the ground. Before the last game of the season that weren't from the area, which is a whole nother interesting topic.
Mm-hmm.
It changes and evolves. I don't know if that's something that I assume we will talk about and touch on.
Yeah, we definitely will. Les, you talked about a style of play there. How important are the players themselves and the characters? Because we hear a lot about Everton's number nines and the like, but who are the players in your memory who've really embodied Everton more than anyone else? And is it always Big Dunker number 9, or is it people like Pickford or others? Who would you pick out that your Everton player?
I think Duncan Ferguson, for like sort of people of sort of our generation, Sarah, probably did sum up the Everton number 9. Really, obviously Rodger or Bob Latchford, who was the same sort of like swashbuckling number 9, diving headers at the street end, all that caper. And I do think it is important for the club to have that figure up front. So when we've had sort of more substandard players playing number 9, it does feel a little bit insulting that just because they play up front they get the number 9. I think there's more to the shirt at Everton. I think every club's got a shirt like that. I think at Liverpool it's number 7, isn't it? I remember when Nigel Clough got the number 7 and they were all going mad about it because he was awful for them. So I think every club has got that sort of totemic shirt, and I think for Everton it is number 9. And I do think it is important to have the right player in that. Obviously in the 80s it was Graham Sharp mainly, but it did switch from time to time to different players. And then I think that the player that sums up this current Everton, Jordan Pickford. I think for me, he's just everything. I think to the team, he's a great embodiment of the club and the fans' mentality. I think he's just it's sort of I think you do need that slightly chaotic personality. I think to sort of epitomise or embody Everton. I think that's my take on it anyway.
Yeah. Sarah, we hear a lot about the change of ownership and everything. And when Bashiri came in, it was the same old. Let's get back to where we belong. What is our status in English football now? Of course, we've got our 9 league titles, but it's been a while. Are we in a big 6? Are we in a big 8? Are we? And I come back to my earlier point about your first experience of Everton is the one that perhaps sticks with you. And first impressions matter. So kids growing up nowadays who aren't even Everton fans wouldn't think about Everton as league champions or winning a European Cup or being part of those founder members of the Premier League or having got more points than almost everyone. So what do you think our current status is, and how does that link to our culture? Because are we a bit sort of deluded in what our status is? I'm not trying to witness you.
Yeah. No. I think it's good to understand where you are currently, because it's where you are, and everything else coming up is just a concept, isn't it? So we have to understand where we are. But I do also understand that we've not won anything for nearly 30 years, and we still on paper are one of the biggest clubs in the country. So um, it's incredibly significant that we remember that, and that we aim for those successes again. But consistent successes for me is what's important, because I think up to the 90s, I think we've won at least one thing. I think 69, 70, and then there was that drought, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Obviously the 80s, the cup in the 90s, and then obviously there's just been this huge gap of nothingness. But yeah, I think it's important you get those things passed down. I was brought up on the 60s and the golden vision, and like, this is the standard, this is the expectation, this is the Holy Trinity, and and the cat, and then even from like the Hicks and stuff that my dad remembers being told about, the Cannonball Kid. So I think it is important to understand that, but you have to also move on. You've got the likes of like Brighton, who are really setting up to be, formidable, decent, and they're here for the long term. They're planning ahead, and I think we've got to, we've got to sit in and just make sure that from the ground up, everything is right.
I think, sorry, Rod, if I can just
Go ahead.
jump in there. I think one of the things to back where we belong, it probably depends how you found the club,
Yeah.
really. So I think like for my kids, they're under no illusions that like we have been good in the past, but we've not been good in their lifetime, and a good few years before their lifetime. So they've kind of got that sort of inbuilt cynicism around stuff. But they are desperate to see us win something. So, they've got obviously a load of Liverpool mates who've seen them win everything. Not so many have been to witness them at the ground to see them winning that stuff. And that's a whole other different conversation, isn't it? And
Yeah.
I think that's the important thing, just to go back to the start where that Sarah was saying it's about family. And that is the big thing for me. I
Yeah.
think not just your actual literal family you go the game with, but the people who sit around you. It all it sounds cliche and it sounds a bit cheesy, but it does become one big family, doesn't it? Because you interact with these people and you love all these people and you
Yeah.
hug them when we score, and you probably argue with them a little bit sometimes as well. But I think that is important. So I think back where you belong, it kind of comes from where you've come at the club from. So for me, it is like Sarah said again, it's winning the odd trophy every now and then. I think the record is it's been every decade except the 50s, hasn't it? 69, 70
That
just
was the
sneaks
relegation.
Just
sneaks into
Yeah.
the 70s, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, so for me, it's that. It's occasionally when I think for the kids, it's probably for my kids, it's probably just like getting sort of eighth, maybe a little European push. We've been to see them in Europe, so it's yeah, it differs, I think.
The family's massive, isn't it? Obviously we go to tend to go to your first game with your dad or your mum or whatever, and if you're lucky enough to then go with your kids, it's just I remember the first time I went with my dad and my son, it was just this is mad, and this is what culture is. It gets passed down through the generations, but also the friends that you make, the people that you meet at the game and that you see regular, semi-regular. It's that sense of togetherness. That's what brings the culture together. But let me kind of broaden it a little bit into. How closely linked do you think the culture of Everton is with the city of Liverpool? I have to keep bringing up the L word, just because half the people abroad may not know that Everton is from Liverpool. We don't carry the name of the city, and that's sometimes viewed by many as as a bit of a millstone. So how closely do you think that Liverpool culture, that family culture, and sort of us against the world kind of culture, is that also part of Everton? And how is Everton distinct from Liverpool FC culture? Either of you?
I'll go. That's fine. So for me, so I've got a weird being from Birkenhead. I've got a slightly weird relationship with Liverpool because like Scousers will take the piss out of people from Birkenhead, obviously.
Tell me about it. Tell me about it. I'm
Well,
from the Wirral. I know
yeah, well,
exactly.
yeah, exactly. But I think that like I think Birkenhead in particular is so close to Liverpool,
Yes.
and people are like, exactly the same. Um, so I don't know. I've never seen Everton as a Liverpool club as such. Maybe Liverpool City region now. I don't know. But I've always thought like we've always got loads of fans from Wirral, North Wales, and now it's obviously a lot into Lancashire and a lot further beyond now. So I don't. I don't know it necessarily has to be a Scouse club because that gets a bit cringy when Liverpool play that caper, where the honorary Scouse and nonsense and all that. I
Mm.
think the thing for me where Everton missed the boat, and I know a lot's made of the fact that Liverpool got the name of the city and it's a big identity because it's part of the culture of the city. I think Everton, it's although it is a place name, it's unique to football. There's no other context that anyone knows Everton aside from people in this area, apart from a football club. And I think that's something that should be played on a bit more. So I think I might have had a conversation with you, Rog, about the naming rights for the ground. I think any
Mm.
naming rights for an Everton Stadium should be brand name Everton Stadium. So the Hill Dickinson
100%.
Everton Stadium. So we get that naming everywhere we can. And whenever anyone hears the word Everton, it's football. And that's a massive thing for me. I think they really do need to play on that more.
I completely agree with you on that, on the stadium naming rights. The brand is Everton. That's the word, Everton Football Club. That's it. And we've seen people support Everton for all hosts of reasons from all over the world. And I do want to touch on, whether it's today or on another episode, different perceptions of Everton culture from around the world and from around the country. But Sarah, give me an insight into, because I've got my own opinions on what is and what isn't copite behaviour, because it seems like we almost, I know we take the piss out of them and we hate them, and that's absolutely fine. It's local rivalry; it exists, and I despise them, and I wish them genuine ill. But I admire them and everything they do because they play good football. They've got their shit together, and they, just like us, had to adapt to the modern game. They've adapted an awful lot better. But what is copite behaviour in your mind in this day and age?
Well, just to give a little bit of context, I came up with a parent who had experienced going to see Everton, and then if Everton were away and he didn't go away, he would go to Liverpool, and then he would go and see Tranmere, I think, on a Friday.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, my did exactly the same in the 50s and 60s. Yeah,
right. Yeah. So just completely immersed in football. I mean,
yeah.
That was the city at that point, and then that fizzled out, and he just that was Everton was his team. And then of course sort of coming up, sort of taking me, I think copite behaviour is this thing that's crept in, whether we've created that as a sort of defence mechanism, I'm not sure. But there were certain things a couple of seasons that were, called copite behaviour, coach greets and things, and that suddenly that's normalised now as something that we do. I'm not sure. I think it's a massive. I think we will have a complex. It's awful. You go into the city. Mac, a friend of mine a few years ago, we were talking about the culture of Liverpool and how we're just like, we're nowhere to be seen. And he just said that Liverpool just put this huge flag in the city and it's theirs. And I have to agree with him. Has it changed with us being sort of in the city now, the ground relocating them? I'm not sure. Time will tell. Again, it will stem from the football. We'll never catch up to them. They're light years ahead. But I think the copite behaviour thing is maybe it's something that how we deal with it, and because they're everywhere.
They're the unbearables.
They're
Yeah,
insufferable. They're insufferable. But it's a brand. It's Liverpool as a brand, and it's completely, it outdoes itself. It's huge. It's world known. It's everything that you kind of don't want and want your club to be at the same time.
Yeah. And that counterculture, that rivals culture, has a massive influence on ours. We might not be playing, but our weekend will be made if they lose. I never felt more like singing the blues when Everton win and Liverpool lose. Those songs that we sing, we play beautiful football. We're respected wherever we go. That's our culture. And so, Les, where does Liverpool sit within this Everton culture? Liverpool FC sit within our culture, do you think?
Personally, I'm becoming a bit more desensitized to them now. I'm getting less and less bothered by them until we play them, really. So I used to, like, when I was like 18, I used to obsess about them and just wanting them to lose every week and wanting the players to get broken legs and everything. It was a terrible existence, really, when you're sort of that hateful of something. And I think as I've got older, and I think as they've got better and like maintained that level, and we've sort of got worse and maintained that level, I think I've kind of made me peace with the fact that, we're just city rivals and that's it. We're not rivals in any other aspect. When we beat them, or when we beat them with a draw, whatever, it still means everything, and it's
Yeah.
still it's the best feeling. But I think for me personally, I'm getting a bit more ambivalent towards them, and I think as a club, Everton probably need to do that as well. Keep the city rivalry, but don't define ourselves by it. So like Sarah said, the coach greets. There's nothing wrong with that. Loads of football fans do it. It's not, they didn't invent it. It's not cop-out behaviour. Taking flags to the games is not cop-out behaviour. Singing at the games isn't cop-out behaviour. It's basically we can't define everything we do by them, and that's our issue to deal with, really. It is horrible having them just there, though, cackling at you all the time. It's not nice.
Just to add on that as well, I do think that I've said it before, but we certainly get under their skin. As
Oh
much as
God, yeah.
big as they are, we're still probably the only club that can ever annoy them the way we do.
I think a good case in point was that we built this city banner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They despise to the point where they made another banner, a counter banner that was crap and didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a rare skill, really, isn't it, that we've got, I think.
Well, I remember in the 70s when they were winning every league title imaginable, and Man United were a bit rubbish. But I really had a soft spot, and still do to an extent, for Man United, because they were the only team that could just rock up at Anfield accidentally and beat them, and they got under their skin in a way that we do. Obviously we do. Just before we wrap up today, I want to talk about ownership, because I think the owners, John Moores had a massive influence on the culture of Everton, those Mersey millionaires back in the day. And owners, they define what the club is, or what their club is. And I do think personally that the Kenwright era and the Magnificent Seven had a detrimental effect on our, or changed our culture to be a little less ambitious. Oh, don't worry, it's Everton. We'll do it our way, and we'll be fine just coming seventh and getting an occasional victory. Do you think that core culture is still open to being adapted by the owner and the narrative that they peddle? Because we didn't like Peter Johnson. He was a bit of an outsider. He tried to change things, and we binned him off. We ended up with Kenwright, who kind of lowered all our expectations. And then Mashiri talked about, expected losses. Sarah, how big an influence do you think the owner or the ownership group can have on that culture, on those fans who've been and seen owners come and go?
I'm not sure. We never settled with Johnson, did we? And he actually gave us that trophy. And there were a few things that he did do that,
Yep.
Historically now have meaning and had something behind them. It's the cop-out thing, maybe. I don't know. Was in the back of our heads.
Didn't help,
Who
did it?
knows? Yeah. I think we need radical owners. I think Moores was definitely a huge radical at the time when he came in to Everton. He wanted to radicalise everything about the game. He wanted us to be a powerhouse. I think we need strong leadership, and we need owners that understand the culture of the area and the club, and what we need. And instead of just sort of throwing money into certain things and making everything about £300 seats and corporate experiences, there needs to have depth, and it needs to have heritage and history behind it as well, and respect for the social and economic sort of experience of the fans too. I just want a radical owner that understands what is needed in order to sustain the club, really. And I think it's just, if we don't have that, and we just have people that are here for a cash cow, then I think it's going to have a detrimental effect.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. This whole our first foray into foreign ownership, if you will, American ownership, and the Reds had their trouble with their first bunch of Yanks, and they seem to have a decent lot now. Les, we've spoken about this before, this balance that needs to be struck with, making the most of your stadium and charging as much as you can in the corporate places. But, there's a proud working class tradition in the Everton fan base, and we don't need £2,000 a year season tickets. So how do you think TFG can go about, striking that balance with the fans, keeping it affordable, retaining that culture, and while still getting enough money to buy these expensive players?
It's something I'm genuinely concerned about, to be honest, because if you look at other clubs, I've just seen the ticket prices Villa are charging. So they're normalising tickets getting, £100 a seat, just like a normal standard seat at a game. I see Newcastle have said if fans don't go to 5 games on the season ticket, they don't get the right to renew it, or they might not. Man United do the same thing. So I'm really worried about that, because it does seem to be a culture that's coming into the top level of football, whereby the owners think this is acceptable to do. I mean, Jim Ratcliffe at Man United, he's a complete basket case anyway. He's ruining that club completely. But I just worry that these little things will creep in, and season ticket holders in particular, or walk-up fans, will get marginalised at the expense of tourists who will go into, the club shop, spend 100 quid, spend 200 quid on a seat, spend 30 quid on food, and then, we when we go, we don't spend anything near that. We probably get in the ground when the game kicks off, we get off straight away. And I think this is where we'll know the sort of direction of travel when we see the prices of the food and the beer and stuff in the ground.
Yeah.
We said this a lot, haven't we? It needs to compete with town, else people just won't bother. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But I do genuinely worry that season tickets holders and traditional fans might start getting priced out in these sort of slightly underhanded ways, whereby you don't get your renewal sort of guaranteed because you miss some games. I kind of think it's all right. If we don't want to go to the game, we bought the season ticket, we can sell the seats on, and that's all right. But it does worry me. It really does. So I guess this is just a wait and see, isn't it?
Yeah, the early signs have been a bit alarming. That whole seat unique deal stinks, as far as I'm concerned. I've said that, and I'll keep saying it. 499 quid to come to the game, maybe get a free beer and a £10 food voucher. It doesn't strike me as the sort of Everton that I remember, or the Everton that I'd identify with. I think you've really got to be careful. And Sarah, how do you feel about things like partners and sponsors? The sorts of Christopher Ward sell lovely expensive watches. Well, that's great, but is this the demographic to be selling those things to?
I think your branding is really important. I think if it wasn't important, we would have stayed at Goodison. So we've obviously moved in order to adapt and to become a digital club instead of being an analog one. I do think that now the world of football has moved so fast. I think it's bypassed Everton in a way. Branding is important, collaborations are important, high fashion is important. We talked about over conversations I know we've had, like Castor and the way the club expresses itself. And I think it's vital that they understand that. And so, going into the new ground with Stake, is that something that we all want? Not too sure. Does that represent what we all feel like the club is at this point? I'm not sure. But it is important. And I think we need to think ahead always, and just to plan is certainly the thing.
Okay. I'm going to wrap it up there, because this has been a short, relatively fundamental discussion around the basics of our culture, and there's plenty of other topics that I want to talk about next time in terms of what difference this new stadium is actually going to make, and how Everton culture varies depending on the age of the fans. We're different age groups, we have different views, different visions, maybe different standards, and how that culture differs between the locals and those who've moved away like myself, or those people who are living abroad, those people who've never even been to Goodison or to Bramley-Moore for that matter, and how we're perceived in the wider media. But for now, thank you both very much for your time. These are challenging times for Everton, but exciting times, I think. And everyone's version of the club is different, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's no single culture that we need to have prescribed to us. We experience the club how we experience it. But and I think we've kind of agreed in large part that it's time for the club to embrace change and not be stuck in the past and think that we're entitled to success and achievement and just being competitive because we're Everton Football Club. We have to be respectful of that history by doing things in the right and proper way, but by being open to learning and embracing and improving as we go, without focusing too much on the success of our rivals and trying to, in fact, emulate them. So if we can focus on the future and remember that the past doesn't come with any guarantees, maybe this culture can become richer and richer as things progress. Please do let us have any comments, like, share as you see fit across the digital platforms, and you can email any questions, as Les said, to theblueroom@theblueroomefc.co.uk. Until the next time, thanks for listening, and up those culture-rich toffees.